BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, warnings that new plans to speed up planning threaten both developers and nature.
Both good infrastructure and thriving nature are really important to people, and to sacrifice that just to focus on speed is ultimately a false economy.
More on that later. But let's start with a call for strategic and coordinated action on rare breeds. The Rare Breeds Survival Trust releases its latest watchlist today and says that while there's good news for some native breeds, others, like the Manx Locton sheep, are falling in number. It wants the government to re-establish a Ministerial Native Breeds Roundtable. RBST Chief Executive Christopher Price.
Two that are of particular concern this year are the Manx Locton and the Leicester Longwool. The Manx Locton is a small, primitive, hardy sheep which, as the name suggests, originated from and is strongly associated with the Isle of Man. Its population declined significantly from the 1950s onwards. They've got a rather attractive reddish-brown fleece and normally a significant number of horns. There can be up to 6 of them, so they're quite spectacular when you see them. Leicester Longwool is a large Longwool breed, has a very long woolly fleece and dark blue ears. Its wool is known for having a spiral curl, and it's very soft with an attractive lustre.
And why do you think these rare breeds are in trouble?
There will possibly be an element of people just choosing not to register their stock because it is expensive and times are hard. We're also talking about really quite small numbers, so it doesn't take much for a few farmers to change their approach to have a significant effect on percentages, which can be alarming. But I think it's as likely or more likely to be a commercial matter. It's harder to find markets for primitive sheep products unless you know what you're doing.
What does primitive mean in this context?
There are a list of breeds which came over from primitive times, by which I mean Vikings, Romans, Celts. They tend to look less like your stereotypical white fluffy sheep. There are some very good farmers, particularly in the Lake District and the West Country, who are making money out of primitive sheep breeds by building a brand based on those primitive qualities and the attractive story they tell. Longwool breeds are about more than wool. They provide wonderful meat, and they can also be used for certain sorts of conservation grazings. So there are markets available if farmers are able to identify them and exploit them.
If we lose these breeds, what do we lose?
A variety of things, I think. First of all, as I've been saying, that they do have a niche economic role. Farmers are going to have to find new ways of running their businesses as we're having to compete more on global markets with the ongoing uncertainty about the future of government support. There is money to be made if you can work out your business properly. Secondly, they are part of our native biodiversity. In February of this year, Mary Creagh, the Environment Minister, was saying that the government was committed to meeting our global biodiversity targets. Those include targets relating to livestock diversity, but sadly we've not heard a peep out of government on that. And then there's what the native breeds add to the landscape and just sort of quality of life. Many of them are interesting to look at. They're exciting. They've got an attractive history. They often have a strong sense of place, being bred to work on particular landscapes and habitats at particular altitudes. There's a strong sense of place that can be built around them. All of those would be lost if we lost those breeds.
Now, you're calling for a Ministerial Native Breeds Roundtable, something that we have had in the past. How would that help?
Under the previous government, it was recognised that we don't have a department within DEFRA that focuses on native breeds, but there are lots of bits within DEFRA that have an impact on native breeds. And what the then Minister, Mark Spencer, to his credit, did was pull together the relevant people with a view to pulling together an overall package that would help support the breeds. Sadly, the election was called before it was finished. I'd emphasise this isn't just about money or even about money. It's simply about DEFRA having a more focused and coordinated approach to something that could provide useful business opportunities for a certain sector of livestock farming in England.
Christopher Price from the Rare Breed Survival Trust. Well, a native, if not rare breed, is at the centre of a Silvopasture project in Wales, which we're looking at today as part of our week on agroforestry. Silvopasture combines trees, livestock grazing and pasture management. Clare and Jacqui Banks, who farm in North Pembrokeshire, use badger-faced sheep in their system, which they've been running for a decade. Mary-Claire Carey-Jones has been to visit them.
Come on in and meet the sheep. So these are badger-faced Torwen sheep.
And they're browsing there on some cut-down branches.
Yeah, so this is a bit of willow that we've given them this morning. It's not much leaf yet, but they take the bark. You're not trying to feed them the bulk of their diet. Just a little bit of it helps them with their general health. This is Pencedni. We're developing here a Silvopasture system.
We got it about 10 years ago, and since then we've been rotationally grazing and planting trees in each of the cells we graze in.
How difficult has it been for you working out what works best here?
Well, lots of trial and error, putting in a lot more than we intend to keep, which is something you can do more with your native broadleaves than your £40 a pop walnut.
And with the walnuts, has it been difficult trialling those here?
So far I've not been disappointed. Plan A is to sell the nuts bagged in shell, I think. Plan B is to run pigs under the trees.
Why would you need the plan B?
In case, when it comes down to it, selling walnuts isn't paying as it should. So what we've done is we've planted a tree in a cactus guard here, which is a sort of spiky cylinder. But what I've done is I've planted a gorse at the bottom of the tree there. And the idea is that the gorse will grow up around the stem of the tree, and then I'll take the cactus guard off, because the gorse will then be protecting the tree from bark nibbling. And then when the tree develops its adult bark, I'll cut the gorse to the ground.
That seems a lot more intensive than if you were just planting a tree in a field with no livestock.
Well, yeah, I mean, the sheep want to eat what's in that cage. That's food to them. And that's exactly why I'm planting it here. I just need to get it up and above the browse line.
So you've got to put lots of protection around them to stop the sheep nibbling them. But actually the sheep are sort of doing a job for the trees as well, in that they're grazing right up sort of around the trees, which is preventing brambles and weeds competing with that tree, so that tree establishes really well.
And what about the challenges?
One of the challenges has actually been dry springs here. So in terms of a tree establishment, it's sort of counterintuitive. We're in wet West Wales, but actually, those dry springs are one of the things that have caused us the biggest problem. And like this current stretch of dry weather, we're out watering things that we planted over winter, which just, that's a lot of work.
This is our orchard. It's mostly apples, dessert apples. And there's some pears, some damsons, and there's some chestnuts. A grazed orchard was what we went for here.
So for you, what are the big advantages of Silvopasture here?
It being a very free draining and south facing slope, we want that shelter provided by the trees for our sheep, for our grass. The grass is consistently much greener under the trees. There's something for the sheep to have a nibble on, there's something for them to scratch on. There's the rainwater infiltration, helping rain into the landscape instead of sheeting off into the nearest river. For us, the ecological integrity is what underpins our agricultural output.
Clare in Pembrokeshire. A government amendment to its planning bill would be disastrous for both wildlife and big building projects. Well, that's the warning from the Wildlife Trusts, which wants ministers to reconsider. The Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which is currently going through Parliament, will introduce changes which aim to streamline the planning system so developers can speed up projects. As we've reported, 32 nature organisations have already got together to write to the government saying that it throws environmental protections to the wind. Well, now But the government has tabled an amendment which would remove statutory consultees from the pre-application process. Statutory consultees include organisations like the Environment Agency, Forestry Commission and Natural England, which advise on a project before it tries to get planning permission. Matt Brown from the Wildlife Trust says to change that would be a step in the wrong direction.
At the moment, since 2008, there have been a list of consultees that when there's a major infrastructure development proposed, that the developers have to consult. And this is really important because it's effectively an early warning system for issues that might come up in the process. And those issues can range from issues that would affect development and make the infrastructure project more difficult to deliver, but also stuff that can affect nature. It's really concerning to see the proposals today which would effectively strip out this expertise and this early warning system.
The government, though, is trying to speed things up. It says it wants to cut down the average 2-year statutory pre-consultation period by half, which would pave the way for new roads, railways and wind farms, they say, which will bolster the country's connectivity and energy security. And that's an understandable aim, isn't it?
It's an understandable aim, but the government has made the wrong diagnosis here. This has been in place since 2008, and if you look at the early years, actually, proposals moved through relatively quickly. What did happen after 2012 was really a decade of austerity, particularly with some of the statutory consultees, leading to real delays in some places where they would respond. The system works, it needs more capacity to deliver. Both good infrastructure and thriving nature are really important to people, and to sacrifice that just to focus on speed is ultimately a false economy. When you're driving over a road bridge, would you like to drive over a road bridge that's been built primarily with the speed of it being built in mind, or one that's had early expertise from the very start, making it the best possible road bridge to drive over? We need to get these things right, and this is a kind of panicked response today that won't deliver for nature and it won't deliver for infrastructure either.
The government's argument, though, is that you can't have big projects delayed or made more expensive. And the example that's always quoted at moments like this is the HS2 Bat Tunnel. So this is a pragmatic way through.
This is not pragmatic at all. What's really important with these infrastructure proposals is that you have expertise in early. This expertise from nature experts, but also from development experts and from local communities. And the famous Bat Tunnel, one of the major issues there was that they did not apply that expertise early enough. That led to a panicked response later on the process and a botched, very expensive solution. Pre-application, the start of the process, that's where you get things right. That's where you nip problems in the bud. And it is really concerning that the government's proposals today would strip out that expertise and early warning system, and it could lead to all sorts of problems later on.
I just want to quote something that the Deputy Prime Minister and the Housing Secretary Angela Rayner has said. She says, "We can't afford to have projects held up by tiresome requirements and uncertainty caused by a system that isn't working for communities or developers." And she describes this change as strengthening the bill.
This is not going to work for creating a level playing field for developers, and it's not going to work for protecting the green spaces and rich natural environment that people really want to see protected. So this big legislative change is going to cause more uncertainty, and that in itself could cause more delays.
Matt Brown there from the Wildlife Trusts. A spokesperson from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government told us the government is clear that removing these statutory requirements does not signify that pre-submission consultation and high-quality engagement is no longer important. They told us that statutory guidance will be introduced, which they say will set strong expectations around consultation. And that's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Beatrice Fenton, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.